Good morning, evening, or night. Wherever you are, welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Saturday, 9th August 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. Israel's plan to militarily seize Gaza City has ignited widespread condemnation, with the Palestinian Authority calling it an unprecedented provocation. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government announced the preparations, facing domestic and international opposition. Netanyahu has expressed his desire for Arab forces to govern Gaza after the conflict. While the cabinet has agreed to Netanyahu's military plan, the future governance of Gaza remains unresolved. Thousands of protesters, reportedly over 100,000, rallied in Tel Aviv, demanding an end to the Gaza war. This conflict has diminished prospects for normalizing relations with neighboring countries. The Israeli government's denial of starvation in Gaza has been criticized. Extremist settler leader Daniela Weiss sees the Gaza war as an opportunity to resettle Jews in the Palestinian enclave. The Palestinian Foreign Minister, Bassem Shahin, is calling for international intervention to halt what she terms Israel's Gaza genocide, urging concrete actions to end Israeli impunity. WIFA's tribute to Suleiman al-Obaid, a former Palestinian international player killed by an Israeli strike on civilians awaiting aid in Gaza, has drawn criticism. The Palestine Football Association confirmed that al-Obaid, 41, was killed in the attack. Turning to Australia, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, along with New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon, has urged Israel to reconsider its plans for a Gaza City takeover. Britain, France, and Germany have hardened their stance on Israel, influenced by images of starving children and settlement expansion plans. Prime Ministers Keir Starmer of Britain and President Emmanuel Macron of France both announced plans last month to recognize the state of Palestine. Australia and New Zealand have rejected potential U.S. trade retaliation linked to recognizing Palestinian statehood. Finally, in Iran, the judiciary is investigating 20 individuals arrested for alleged connections with Israel following the recent conflict. Ukraine remains resolute in its refusal to cede any territory to Russia, a position President Volodymyr Zelensky emphasized as the U.S. and Russia gear up for a summit. He underscored that no agreements reached without Ukraine's active involvement would bring genuine peace. Zelensky also conveyed his strong support for the unified statement issued by European leaders, stressing the necessity for a just resolution to the ongoing conflict. Furthermore, he expressed gratitude to those nations and organizations that are supporting Ukraine's pursuit of peace. Even prior to the summit between President Trump and Vladimir Putin, Vice President J.D. Vance engaged with European allies and Ukrainian officials. In a related development, leaders from 6 European countries and the EU are collectively advocating for increased pressure on Russia, aiming to present a united front before the Trump-Putin summit in Alaska, reaffirming their unwavering support for Ukraine. Turning to Russia, its air defense systems reportedly intercepted 121 Ukrainian drones overnight. Among these, 8 were specifically targeting the Saratov region. Separately, a Ukrainian drone attack caused a fatality and damaged an industrial facility, also in Saratov, with Ukrainian media reporting a fire at an oil refinery in the city. Seeking to bolster his position before the upcoming summit with US President Donald Trump, President Vladimir Putin engaged in discussions with Chinese President, aiming to secure Beijing's support. Putin's broader strategy appears to be aimed at potentially dividing the Western alliance by negotiating an end to the Ukraine war on terms favorable to Russia. However, Chinese experts have voiced skepticism about the potential for success at the Alaska summit and its stated goal of negotiating an end to the Ukraine war. In the United Kingdom, the Alan Turing Institute ATI, a prominent AI research institution, is grappling with internal strife as staff members have filed a whistleblowing complaint raising concerns about the organization's governance and internal culture. This development occurs amid increasing government pressure, spearheaded by Technology Secretary Peter Kyle, to implement a comprehensive overhaul of the ATI's strategic direction and leadership. Shifting gears, the UK government is proposing a significant policy change to deport most foreign criminals immediately after their conviction, rather than after they have served 30% of their prison sentence. Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood announced this plan, which also includes a ban on deported offenders re-entering the UK. Concerns are also mounting regarding the availability of unregulated DI Botox-like injections, specifically Inotox, which are easily accessible online. Unlike traditional Botox, Inotox is a ready-to-use liquid, simplifying self-administration, but can lead to serious health complications, including eyelid droops, infection, and even botulism. Finally, London's Metropolitan Police have made a series of arrests during protests linked to Palestine action. Initially, police arrested 466 people at a Palestine action demonstration. Later, more than 360 individuals were arrested at a protest against the British government's decision to ban the group. Subsequently, at least 200 more arrests were made at what has been described as the largest protest in support of Palestine action since the ban was implemented. China is currently seeing Jinping consolidate power following corruption scandals in the military, prompting worries about combat readiness as he seeks to modernize the People's Liberation Army by 2027. Senior diplomat Liu Jiankao was detained for investigation after returning to Beijing from an overseas work trip in late July. Beijing and Hebei province faced severe flooding in late July, causing dozens of deaths, including 31 at a nursing home in Miyun district, marking the fifth major flood in northern China since 2012. To counter Western narratives about Xinjiang, China aired a documentary called Zuo Zongtang, recovers on the Qing dynasty's recapture of the region. Extreme online fandom surrounding pandas and table tennis has raised concerns, leading the China Conservation and Research Center for the giant panda to condemn toxic fan culture and online abuse targeting panda keepers. China is set to begin work on the Xinjiang-Tibet Railway, a significant infrastructure project with 95 billion yuan, $13.20 billion. In capital, fully owned by China State Railway Group, Wang Xing, the founder of Unitree Robotics, anticipates a ChatGPT moment for robotics within 2 years, envisioning robots performing tasks like cleaning or delivering items in unfamiliar environments using advanced AI. OpenAI's GPT-5 received mixed reviews in China, with some critics expressing disappointment in its lack of breakthroughs, despite OpenAI touting improvements in coding, maths, writing, health, and visual capabilities. China should monitor India's infrastructure upgrades in a disputed border area, particularly the Darbuk-Shiok-Daulat Beg Oldie DSTBO road, which is being upgraded to accommodate tanks and long-range missile carriers, while continuing its own development efforts in the region. Shifting focus to Taiwan, Li Yang, head of the Taipei Economic and Cultural Representative Office in Japan, attended the Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic bombing commemorations. His presence and seating arrangements at the Nagasaki event may test the improving China-Japan relation. Australia faces scrutiny over alleged exports of weapon components to Israel, despite official denials of direct weapon supply. Meanwhile, Tasmania's Premier Jeremy Rockcliffe committed to ending greyhound racing by 2029, spurred by a recent high-profile euthanization. The United Kingdom hosted a meeting with Ukrainian and European partners, led by Foreign Secretary David Lammy, and as Vice President J.D. Vance to strategize for peace in Ukraine ahead of a Trump-Putin meeting. In the United States, Donald Trump nominated Tammy Bruce as Deputy Representative to the UN, while IRS Commissioner Billy Long was removed after disagreements with the White House. Analyzing the impact of US policies, several articles discuss the U.S. weapons industry's effects on democracy, RFK Jr.'s alignment with Trump on vaccine funding cuts, Southeast Asian navigation of US economic uncertainties, and how Trump's State Department restructuring may benefit China. Japan is preparing for the Osaka Expo by installing giant umbrellas, mist fans, and ice boxes to counter the summer heat for visitors. The country is also experiencing a summer holiday travel surge, with Shinkansen and flights at full capacity. In Nagasaki, twin cathedral bells rang together for the first time in 80 years to commemorate the atomic bombing. As atomic bombing survivors age, Japan faces the challenge of maintaining its anti-nuclear stance. The unique shape of the Pocky snack has now received trademark protection. Two Japanese boxers, Shigetoshi Kotari and Hiromasa Urakawa, both 28, tragically died from brain injuries after fights in Tokyo. The National Police Agency released its first report on traffic accidents involving foreign drivers. Foreign Minister Takeshi Iwaya expressed Japan's concern over Israel's control of Gaza City. The United States and Japan are nearing an agreement to eliminate universal tariffs on Japanese goods. In international news, a spacecraft carrying U.S. astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers, Japanese astronaut Takuya Onishi, and Russian cosmonaut Kirill Peskov safely returned to Earth off the California coast. Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine continues to dominate global headlines, reaching its 1.26 3rd day. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has firmly rejected ceding any territory to Russia, dismissing a suggestion from U.S. President Donald Trump that proposed such a concession as a path to a ceasefire. This stance could potentially put Zelensky at odds with Trump, who is scheduled to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska next Friday to explore avenues for ending the conflict. Putin anticipates making headway towards a resolution during this summit. Moscow has cautioned of major attempts to derail the upcoming meeting between Putin and Trump. There are worries in Ukraine and among its allies that Presidents Trump and Putin will strike a deal independently and then attempt to impose that deal on Kyiv. Moving across the Atlantic, in the United Kingdom, British Foreign Secretary David Lammy hosted U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance for discussions on topics of shared concern at Chevening. India is at the center of global debates over the scope of the Global Plastics Treaty, advocating alongside several oil-producing nations for a focus on pollution management rather than production limits. Simultaneously, India is strengthening ties with Australia through a strategic minerals partnership, aiming to reduce reliance on China and boost technological development through joint ventures. India's Air Force chief asserted that S-400 systems downed 6 Pakistani aircraft in May, a claim Pakistan denies, highlighting continued tensions. Domestically, large-scale immigration raids have led to thousands of detentions, sparking fear and accusations of religious and linguistic bias against the BJP government. In Indian-administered Kashmir, authorities have banned 25 books, drawing criticism for restricting public access and freedom of expression. Separately, 2 Indian soldiers and a suspected militant died in a gunfight in Indian-controlled Kashmir. Thailand is embroiled in a dispute with Cambodia after 3 Thai soldiers were injured by landmines near their border, with 1 soldier losing a foot. Thailand alleges that Cambodia planted new landmines, violating international law and ceasefire agreements. The Cambodian Mine Action and Victim Assistance Authority denies the accusation. This incident is the third in recent weeks involving Thai soldiers injured by landmines in the border region. Iran faces potential geopolitical setbacks after a U.S.-brokered agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia. This deal, granting control of a strategic border corridor to a U.S. private consortium, has sparked Iranian anxieties about external meddling. Ali Akbar Velayati, a key international affairs advisor, voiced Iran's opposition to the disarmament of Hezbollah. Adding to internal security concerns, Iran detained 20 individuals suspected of spying for Israel, some of whom have since been released, according to judiciary spokesperson Azhar Jahangiri. Iran is also signaling a divergence from its ally Russia, rejecting a planned border route detailed in the Armenia-Azerbaijan agreement, notably supported by former US President Donald Trump. Mexico's drug cartels are now employing chemicals to conceal the odor of fentanyl. This adaptation helps them evade detection while smuggling the drug into the U.S. Mexican president. Andrés Manuel López Obrador has rejected the possibility of U.S. military intervention within Mexico. This follows President Trump's directive to target drug cartels. The rejection could strain the cooperative relationship between the two countries on counter-narcotics initiative. Following a period of heightened tensions, North Korea has started removing its propaganda loudspeakers along the border with South Korea. This action follows South Korea's earlier removal of its own loudspeakers. South Korea's military is actively monitoring the situation to confirm the complete dismantling of the North Korean devices. President Lee Jae-myung of South Korea has expressed his intention to continue working towards improved relations with North Korea. Lebanon experienced a tragic incident as 6 soldiers died in an explosion. This occurred at a Hezbollah military facility and weapons depot in Wadi Zitchin, a location in southern Lebanon, close to the Israeli border. An army unit was inspecting the depot and working to dismantle its contents. The contents included elements of Hezbollah infrastructure. Australia and New Zealand are deepening their military ties in response to China's recent military drill. The leaders of both nations, Christopher Luxon and Anthony Albanese, are also committed to improving living standards through strengthened cooperation. Turning to New Zealand, healthcare professionals are pushing for the adoption of updated endometriosis treatment protocols. The proposed guidelines emphasize non-invasive imaging to minimize the reliance on surgical intervention for the estimated 1 in 10 women and girls in New Zealand affected by the condition. North Korea is dismantling loudspeakers along its border with South Korea, mirroring South Korea's earlier actions. South Korea anticipates security cooperation will be central to discussions between U.S. President Donald Trump and South Korean leader Lee Jae-myung at their upcoming summit. Trump aims to recalibrate alliances due to China's increasing power. In Hapcheon County, South Korean survivors of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings gathered to mark the 80th anniversary, honoring their experiences and ensuring their stories are remembered. France is seeing its president, Emmanuel Macron, join a chorus of European leaders urging intensified pressure on Russia. Italy's Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, is also part of this unified front. So, Germany's Friedrich Merz adds his voice to the call for a firmer stance against Russia, particularly with the possibility of a summit between President Trump and Vladimir Putin looming. Poland's Donald Tusk is similarly advocating for increased pressure. The UK's Keir Starmer completes this group of prominent figures. These leaders have collectively voiced their support for President Trump's initiatives to resolve the conflict in Ukraine. Italy is moving forward with ambitious infrastructure projects and sporting accommodation. The long-debated Strait of Messina Bridge, designed to span 2 miles and connect Sicily to the mainland, is being actively pursued after decades of stalled progress since its initial approval in the 1970s. Due to persistent political instability and security challenges within Libya, Italy will host Libya's soccer championship for the second year running. Libya remains divided with two separate governments and leagues. Meanwhile, Nathan Chen from the United States, the current Winter Olympic men's figure skating champion, has confirmed that he will not be defending his title at the upcoming Games in Italy. In the United States, a shooting near the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, headquarters and Emory University in Atlanta led to the death of a DeKalb County police officer. The shooter, Patrick Joseph White, 30, reportedly blamed a COVID-19 vaccine for his depression and suicidal thoughts. White was also allegedly upset about the death of his dog. Separately, in Georgia, a woman forgave the man convicted of killing her husband in a hit-and-run incident, showing a remarkable act of compassion. Bangladesh has seen Mohammed Yunus, the Nobel Peace Prize winner from 26, appointed as chief advisor to the interim government. Yunus aims to ensure a smooth transfer of power. This follows the upcoming inclusive elections next year. The Awami League is barred from participating in the election. Pakistan's Defense Minister Khawja Asif has firmly denied claims that Indian armed forces shot down any Pakistani aircraft. This rebuttal comes in response to Air Chief Marshal Amarpreet Singh's statement about the Indian Air Force, IFF, allegedly downing 5 Pakistani fighter jets during Operation Sindoor. Brazil is seeing some of former President Jair Bolsonaro's supporters appealing to Donald Trump for intervention, fearing potential jail time for Bolsonaro related to an alleged conspiracy to overturn the 2022 election. These supporters hope Trump can counteract what they perceive as a negative influence in the country. In other news, a bus crash in Mato Grosso involving a truck led to 11 deaths and 45 injuries on a toll road. The United States has authorized the Pentagon to use military force against specific criminal gangs. These gangs have been designated as terrorist organizations by the U.S. government. This follows the previous designation of drug cartels as terrorist entities. Shifting to Canada, the government is facing increased pressure to address rising inflation. Economists are debating the effectiveness of current monetary policies. Public concern is growing over the increasing cost of living. Meanwhile, in France, President Macron is facing renewed protests over pension reforms. Demonstrations have intensified in major cities across the country. Union leaders are calling for further strikes and disruptions. Public support for the reforms remains low. Turning our attention to China, the government has announced new measures to stimulate economic growth. These measures include tax cuts and infrastructure investments. The aim is to boost domestic demand and offset global economic headwinds. These measures follow a period of slower than expected growth. In Germany, Chancellor Scholz is navigating a complex energy crisis. The country is seeking alternative energy sources to reduce reliance on Russian gas. Public debate continues regarding the transition to renewable energy. The government is implementing measures to support households and businesses. Across the Atlantic, Brazil is grappling with deforestation in the Amazon rainforest. President Lula da Silva has pledged to strengthen environmental protection measures. International pressure is mounting on Brazil to address the issue. The government is working with indigenous communities to combat illegal logging. The Netherlands is currently experiencing a worrying spike in explosions, with an average of 3 incidents occurring each night. These explosions are not only causing significant property damage, as seen with the recent damage to an apartment building in Dordrecht, but also raising serious concerns about potential injuries and fatalities. Haiti has declared a 3-month state of emergency to address escalating gang violence in its central region. Armed groups have intensified their attacks across the country, prompting the government's action. The state of emergency is intended to bolster efforts to combat the growing insecurity. Armenia and Azerbaijan have formally ended their long-standing conflict by signing a U.S.-brokered peace deal at the White House. This landmark agreement includes the crucial reopening of transportation routes between the two nations. The United States gained significant development rights to a major transit corridor linking Azerbaijan and its exclave of Nakhchivan, now christened the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity. Turkey witnessed a pivotal moment as a militant Kurdish group declared end to its armed conflict, prompting reflection among bereaved mothers on the conflict's devastating impact. Simultaneously, the ancient site of Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey is reshaping perspectives on early civilization and sparking diverse, sometimes speculative, interpretations, including discussions on popular media platforms. Syria has withdrawn from planned Paris talks with Kurdish-led fighters, according to a government source who cited a recent conference led by Kurdish groups as undermining the ongoing discussions aimed at implementing a March integration agreement. Domestically, Syria's Truce leader is advocating for an international investigation into the deadly clashes in southern Syria last month, which resulted in hundreds of deaths. The Maldives is banking on tourism to alleviate its significant debt, as evidenced by the inauguration of a new airport terminal designed to accommodate increased international arrivals. Shifting focus to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is facing renewed criticism over his government's handling of rising inflation and housing costs, issues expected to dominate upcoming parliamentary debate. Meanwhile, in France, President Emmanuel Macron is working to solidify support for controversial pension reforms amid ongoing labor strikes and public demonstrations across the country. The United States is grappling with the aftermath of recent severe weather events, prompting federal disaster relief efforts and sparking renewed debate on climate change policy and infrastructure resilience. Australia celebrated Emily Wurramara, a Wanantilliaqua singer who received the Artist of the Year award at the National Indigenous Music Awards. During her acceptance speech, Wurramara expressed solidarity with the people of Palestine and other indigenous communities experiencing oppression. Ireland is seeing a rise in violent attacks targeting immigrants. Recent incidents include assaults on Indian men in Tallaght and Clondalkin and an attack on an Indian taxi driver in Ballymundall. Turning to Colombia, Senator Miguel Uribe Turbay, shot during a June campaign rally in Bogota, has suffered a hemorrhage. His condition is now critical. In Iraq, the Prime Minister has authorized disciplinary measures against senior commanders within a paramilitary force. This follows clashes with police last month that caused 3 deaths. Cautious optimism is present in Armenia and Azerbaijan. Leaders from both countries signed a U.S.-brokered agreement aiming to resolve decades of conflict. In Greece, wildfires near Athens, fueled by strong winds, have resulted in 3 deaths. Authorities fear more strong winds may intensify the blazes across multiple regions. In Chad, opposition leader Success Masra, a former prime minister, has been sentenced to 20 years in prison. The charges are related to inciting violence during intercommunal clashes in May, which he denies. France has deployed around 1,400 firefighters to the Order region. They are working to prevent the resurgence of the country's largest wildfire in decades. Ivory Coast is experiencing protests in Abidjan. Thousands are opposing the exclusion of opposition leaders from the upcoming presidential election. Ecuador experienced an attack by gunmen on a boat off the southeastern coast. At least 4 people died and more than a dozen are missing. The Democratic Republic of Congo reports that Rwanda-backed rebels have killed at least 80 civilians. These killings occurred in the eastern part of the country. Del Cevsel, Guatemala was struck by a 5.9 magnitude earthquake off its southwest coast. No significant damage has been reported so far. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.